Thank you to Method, Pragmatic Institute, and Feature Upvote for supporting Product Coffee. Today's session is a product roundtable, and sometimes we have a speaker and an exercise, but today what we're going to do is we're going to just really talk about some topics that are on your mind. And I certainly asked for some suggestions as people were signing up for today's session, and we got a couple of really good questions that have come in that people would really like to discuss. But at any point you have a topic that you'd like to raise, just throw up your hand and using the interactions panel here in Zoom, and I will pull you to the front and let you ask your question and get some feedback and thoughts from your product peers. We also had a couple of questions that came on before we even launched the session, some things that we've been hearing on the Product Coffee website and in our Product Coffee chat groups a few times along the way. And so I thought I'd start off with some leadership topics. And one of the things that, whether you're an individual contributor in a product company, in a product team, or you're a leader or manager with multiple reports helping to implement the strategy that you're responsible for. There's a lot of work to be done managing up and managing down. Today we're going to talk about managing up a little bit. And one of the questions that came in from one of our regular participants the other day was, do you ever have a situation where you have to manage stakeholders who have kind of a biased perspective on that they bring to the table when you're thinking about your roadmap priorities? How do you manage stakeholder input and sometimes bias towards product direction when you're trying to manage and balance your roadmap in a customer-centric company? Have you struggled with that? Has anybody here struggled with that personally? Have you had to manage that conversation?
Yeah, I've had plenty. I think anyone in product management's had that plenty of times, and you get it from two, from multiple sides. But the two dominant sides are, I would say, the technical people and the sales people. To me, the bottom line though is if you have good data to back up your decisions. All right. So, and this to me gets to being market focused versus inwardly focused. I'm kind of dealing with that now with the sales team where I'm in the healthcare technology market. We sell into the payer space, and there was a very small payer, like 50,000 members, and a big part of their need was that they weren't really looking for huge value out of the product. What they were looking for is to be able to comply with federal regulations. And in order to do that, you have to be what's called FedRAMP certified, which is really for them, it's more the Department of the Defense. It doesn't really affect CMS. It's more DOD. So for this 50,000 member plan, it would probably take us a minimum of 6 months and God knows how much money to get FedRAMP certified. So they're already sales is already pushing this. And I'm kind of pushing back saying, how much DOD business is out there that we're pursuing? And is this a market we really want to get into? Especially because I have a brand new product. So we're still trying to launch it. And I see the same thing with, it's the classic situation of, I just talked to so-and-so and they're looking for services and it's 100,000 member plan, and most of our plans are large Blue Cross Blue Shield plans that have no need for services. So I try to politely push back and say, let's figure out if this is a market that we want to go into, not just one 50,000 member plan before we're a 200 person company. It's not like we have those 400 developers that you were talking about. I'm lucky if I have 4 developers that are dedicated and getting things done on time and getting it done right. So I just don't see right now how that's going to fit. So I kind of put it back on them. In the IT side, they are typically don't have the bigger picture of the business, right? They're saying, now, to take it into consideration, absolutely. And if it's something that, is more of a, will it reduce my cost for implementation or reduce the time, or is it for the greater good of the company? But I think bottom line is you just have to be able to know your market, know your customers, and know your product enough, both from a technical side as well as the business side, to be able to back up why you are doing or not doing something. Like, Jason, I know we're talking about the topic of another time about when is a product strategic versus tactical, and I think that really lends itself to that as well.
I would echo what Mark said. Really, it's sales and dev who are the squeakiest wheels, and I'm navigating that this week to make sure that the roadmap short term is aligned with not just what dev recognizes needs to be done, but with what sales needs to be done. And one of the ways I can hold sales accountable is go into Salesforce and look at the reports on win-loss and look at the top causes for loss and return to them what they've put in Salesforce to say, okay, so these are the top 3 reasons that I see that you've put in Salesforce for losing an opportunity. And here are, based on that information that you provided, and based on what I'm seeing, talking to devs and seeing real-time performance stats, are we in alignment? And then taking the list from Salesforce, the list from the sales engineers as well, what I'm hearing from sales engineers, and saying to my top internal key stakeholders, okay, by 48 hours from now, please provide me any updates to these 2 lists. Here's what I hear you saying. Here's what you've documented. What am I missing? But it's, to Mark's point, it's all about the data and garbage in, garbage out, right? If you can't give me the real information in Salesforce, then let's do something about that so that communication loop clearly reflects what's going on.
How many of you, that's a really good point. I'm curious, just by show of hands, and you can use the interaction panel here in Zoom to raise your hand if you feel like you have enough data available to you as a product manager to make data-driven decisions like Mark and Jessica are talking about. Anybody gonna raise their hand and say, yeah, we've got good data? People having trouble finding the I've got a down vote here. No, I don't have enough good data. That's an interesting thing. So we're talking about that, need for data to make good, rational decisions. But I don't. Okay, I've got one hand up here.
Yeah, I put the down thumb, but it really does depend, right? So. Mm-hmm. Like this issue I was just talking about with this Department of Defense technical mandate, I know I have a lot of information about my market, but that's kind of a niche of a niche. So that's something I don't have a lot of information about. So it sort of depends, I guess, is whether it's a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah, I can understand that. I saw Smith just gave me a fist bump, or is that like a fist of 0?
Well, Jason, this is Andy. You said good data, and first of all, there's data, and then there's good data, and that's a difference, right? And then, as a product manager or leader, a lot of times I find myself having to research the data, kind of real time, because either, and for me, it's more of a sales kind of thing where I'm always battling them, and I have a saying to my sales teams: sell what we have, not what we don't. because inevitably they mix up product market fit and market product fit. And they always want to create something. We might have something that's close to what the customer has, but then the customer has special requests, right? And then they come to us and they go, hey, I want this new feature, I want this new capability, whatever. And I'm like, well, what tells me that we can even make money at it? What, there's all sorts of things you got to go through, but I find myself having to go and do the research myself, almost on a case by case basis, and then then come back to them, or I think I heard Jessica say, I put it back on them. Like, you tell me why you think this is a good deal, or why do you think we need this new feature, or what have you. So there's a lot of interaction, but I agree, it's the data, but I think we find ourselves having to make sure we've got good data as well. And I think most of the time it's not readily available. We just need to go and find it on a constant basis.
Yeah, I'll add to what Andy said. I raised my hand. This is sort of timely, right? And that we literally just had this conversation in the last couple of days, that the data we're getting from sales, right, loss reasons, when we follow up, right, aren't very accurate, right? Hey, this is a software capabilities loss, and so we get a vague use case, and we follow back up with the sales rep or the sales engineer, and we find out it's like, oh no, they had a previous relationship with so and so, and it's like, okay, wait a minute. So I raised my hand because I do think from a product perspective, right, we have to feel empowered to go get the data. So we're starting a win-loss program. Our sales and marketing team don't do it. And so we're saying product management is going to send out an automated email, right, to 2 weeks after a loss or a win in Salesforce. Right. We're going to work with our marketing team to get that sent out via HubSpot. We're going to have the conversation, right? We're going to do the interviews so we can dig in and learn and get more information. And then we'll share that back with the organization, but we'll get our own data to be able to help drive those conversations and match it up again with, with what sales is saying. So we're not going to replace, right? Sales is still going to get the phone call that says, hey, I'm not buying from you. So great, have your conversation, but right, we want to make sure we can follow up as well.
Cool. I love that you're starting your own win-loss program. It's the best way to do it. And are you gonna DIY, or are you going to like bring in a service agent, a service organization to execute on that win-loss program for you?
Yeah, we're going to start it just doing it ourselves, right? Here's our questions. We're at a fairly high volume right now for, we've got 100 or so opportunities that are sort of one lost in a given month. And we have no idea how many responses we're going to get. So we've sort of started off with, 2 of us are going to just sort of alternate and tackle them. And then if we get more, we'll figure out who else we bring in to round robin.
I see Jeff Durnovich doing a lessons learned session in about 6 months. That's cool. Thanks, Jeff. By the way, as you speak up, please do tell us, if we haven't introduced you so far today, introduce yourself, tell us who you're with, if you like, at least give us your name and where you're calling in from. But a lot of this is kind of leading into a conversation for me. It's ultimately, it's about focus, right? It's making sure that we're focused on the right things. And there are a couple different stages you might be in as a company. It might be that you've achieved product market fit. You know who your market is. You've got a product that is serving a need in that marketplace, and you're trying to grow and expand and figure out how to capture more market share. Or it could be that you're still in that discovery stage. And so I think there are a couple of different scenarios that you might be in. And that leads back to the question. One of the questions that came in with the registrations this week was really around the notion of, is the product that I'm working on, is the work that I'm doing, is it strategic work, or is it more tactical, reactive work? And how do I tell the difference? And so I wanted to think about that, and I'm gonna really I know there are a couple of people on here with some pretty strong opinions, so I'd really like to get you to jump up, but I got a couple of people I'll call on if you don't jump up. When you're thinking about product strategy. First of all, what does the notion of having a product strategy mean to you? Is it, for me, a product strategy is a North Star. It's a guiding, it's guidance to the product overall, to the direction that you're going to move overall. It tells us who's the customer trying to solve, and what are the core problems that we need to solve for that customer. And that leads to a product vision, which is different from a company vision. I was having a really good exchange on Twitter with Saeed Khan about this notion of product vision and how many companies get it wrong. But for me, having a product vision that is a well-crafted product vision and really does the job of putting a stake in the ground and saying, when our product is mature, this is what the world is going to look like. This is what our customers' experience, our customers' lives is going to look like when our product is mature. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the notion of product strategy and understanding where you currently exist on the strategic spectrum. Are we marching towards a product vision, towards a strategic product, or are we being fairly reactive and just listening to the voice of the customer and hearing what are they asking for now and how can we fill that need? And I'm curious as to how people respond to that question, what your thought on the notion of product vision and product strategy is.
I can tell you where we're struggling, or I'm struggling. So I work for an HCM company where we sell software, recruiting, onboarding, payroll, benefits, etc. The challenge is, what is the product, right? Customers buy a suite and they expect it to be better together, so to speak, right? HR should integrate well with payroll and everything should flow through. They should have common reporting, but then you have product managers over individual products who are potentially representing the payroll administrator or the benefits administrator or the recruiter. And the expectations of the big product, the suite, is different than at the individual product level. And there's a little tension there. And being able to kind of map all the way back up is a challenge. It makes it a challenge across the board. KPIs, am I looking at the payroll success or am I looking at the suite? And just, it's one of the struggles we have. I like having a North Star, but like I said, those two things can sometimes be at odds with each other. The buyer, the chief people officer, the chief finance officer versus the mid-level manager, user, the payroll administrator, and figuring out how to align that all together. So it's a challenge. I don't know that I've got a great solution.
It is a challenge, and the more mature your portfolio is, then likely the more diversified you become over time, because you have identified. We talk about different levels of innovation and 3 horizons of innovation, and when we're first getting started, we're hopefully, depending on the company that you're in, you're out there on horizon 3 where you're actually looking to create new markets, but you end up identifying a market, creating product market fit, and then for a very long time you have to be very good at that first horizon of just taking the promise that we're making to our customers and delivering on that promise in a better way. Then as you mature, you move into horizon 2 where you start seeking adjacencies. And you're looking for ways to expand our revenue because, hey, we're doing really well in our core market. Are there some things over here on the side that can add to our revenue picture? And that's where you start to get the complexity that you're talking about, because you're serving you're not just serving 1 or 2 personas. You're serving a wide variety of them. And you're absolutely right. There's no easy answer to it. It's a very complex answer. I see Matt, you've got your hand up. Are you wanting to weigh in on this one, or are you wanting to take it in a different direction?
No, I was going to weigh in on that and sort of just jump in and yeah. So from my experience, this kind of gets back to the earlier question as well as managing up. I have found that having an explicit sort of company vision and then tying the product vision into the upper company goals has really helped me to manage upward and be able to sort of, politely say no to requests that come in that may not fit with those two explicit things, right? So if you don't have that company, that product strategy and product vision, I've seen examples a lot of times where different teams are working on different initiatives that actually compete and contradict with each other across the board. And it's really hard to get alignment when there's all these little pockets that have different incentivizations across your organization. I found it so helpful to put down on paper, on purpose, here's our explicit strategy with this project or with this particular product, whether it be like we're going to go capture enterprise level customers and large customers, or we're gonna be sort of a niche product and go in here. It really helps focus efforts and then drive teams across the organization to start working in lockstep. And I've found without that, it's just sort of, you're just in arguments all the time. Without being able to point back to that and say, look, here's the vision we've established. Our leadership teams have bought into this. This is the way we're marching. If you don't want to go that direction, that's fine, but it's a very different conversation at a different level within the company. So I found it extremely helpful to just be very explicit with that sort of product strategy and product vision.
I really like that. I know, Jason, when you and I were working together at Silverpop, we did that as well, right? We aligned our prioritization, right? One of our prioritization criteria was alignment with sort of mission, vision, right? And OKRs or goals for a given period of time. That definitely helps. I love what Matt said. I think focus is the right word. So we just ran through this book, Profit from the Core. So I'm at Least Query, by the way. Sorry, I was making sure one of my former colleagues, who's now a competitor, wasn't in the room, so I can say this. And we found ourselves, right, trying to go in a billion different directions. And so when I started last October, and I was like, wow, we have all these pet projects, and everyone wants everything to move forward. And so I had to have the conversation, right, with the rest of the executive team to say, hey, we can't do all of this. And so the Profit from the Core really helped us to say, what's actually our core? What is actually the things we're good at, right? Our unique, our distinctive competencies and those types of things. Let's focus on that. And what's so interesting is I have to keep holding the book up in meetings, because just 1 month after reading the book and agreeing to cut a bunch of projects that were like, hey, that's probably not big enough for us to focus on. Hey, that's probably not big enough to focus on. All of a sudden in meetings, there's like, hey, that's a great idea. Jeff, why don't you guys look at that? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, like time out. That's not even, that's an adjacency to one of the things we just killed. So like, let's come back to our core. So I do think stopping that sort of squirrel, mentality of shiny thing and whatever else, right, is important in being able to just continue to keep people focused on. And so I agree with Matt, like write it down, like what is the company strategy? What is mission vision? And let's stay aligned with that and continue to evaluate that, right, sort of at every opportunity.
Well, good morning. This is Reggie from 32nd Street Media.
Hey, Reggie.
There's a reason why there in recent years there's been a big push for enterprise companies to come back down to the startup level and to send people into different hubs to create a product. And that's because it's hard to do it in the big enterprise company with so many layers. And as a startup, I think a lot of times our vision is more clear because of the lack of layers or the lack of red tape, if you will, or the lack of red tape. And so the vision is clearer, but also it's harder to get to that vision, because when you're a company of 2 or 3, you have to reach out for ideas without giving your ideas away. And so it took us 3 years to hone in on what our product really is. It started with an app, but now it's a platform because of what the customer's needs are. We are we are providing a self-monitoring blood pressure solution. And so we found that the customer needs were accuracy to the EHR and to be able to have the readings measured in different ways, you know, geospatial and all of those different ways. So once we figured out the customer need, you know, it was easy for us, but an enterprise company would have probably got there in a year, less than a year. But the red tape might have kept them from answering the question of, will this help the patient achieve controlled blood pressure, which is the bottom line. And so I heard Kelly Jones. I hear your pain points, but I'm quite sure if you guys would delve into a ATDC or a different type incubator with the products you're trying to create, you might have an easier chance of finishing what you set out to create.
And I was thinking in that vein as well. There are a couple of different approaches and possibilities that you're dealing with. You know, in Kelly's situation, she's got, you know, a pretty broad portfolio of products that expand the entire HR ecosystem. Your vision, Reggie, is very clear, and I love the way that you just stated it. Are we helping our customers achieve controlled blood pressure? That is clear. We have a platform that helps our customers. Our customers have control over their blood pressure. And I'm not getting the words exactly right, but that is a clear focus, and that really helps to inform everything you do. And it's very easy. So if we take that notion of a very clear product vision and look at somebody like Tesla, for example. And this was kind of going back to the conversation that Saeed and I were having on Twitter the other day. But Tesla has a product vision for their cars, and that's to create the most compelling car company of the 21st century by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. That's their mission. That's their product vision. Is for the company of Tesla, or that's their company vision, not their product vision. And that was kind of part of the discussion that we're getting into is you have a company vision that talks about what your company is going to be and what your company is going to do and what it's going to achieve. And then you have product vision for how that product is going to contribute to that, how it's going to impact your customer. So with your product, because of the stage of company that you're in an earlier stage company, 3 years, I know it doesn't seem like it's early stage, but it really is. When you're in an early stage company, your company vision and your product vision can be very tightly aligned and easy to draw the connection to. In a much more mature, massive enterprise like an IBM or a UKG, or even potentially an Arby's, for goodness sake, or a VMware. In those situations, you've had that diversification. So your product visions, you end up with multiple product visions that need to go back to a company vision and mission, but maybe to see who was talking about, was it Mark? Who was talking about having competing products that are kind of like competing with each other a moment ago? Somebody was, but that's kind of the interesting changes is tying those individual looking at those individual product visions and making sure that each product itself has its own vision that supports the company vision. Yes.
Jason, what I didn't say was that we're an 8-year-old company and we pivoted three times.
Yep.
And so that's the part of finding your vision. You know, we thought we wanted to do video content because my background is video content, but what we end up doing is we're probably more of an enterprise company because our CEO is a former a sales director for a telecommunication company. And so she got 25 years of enterprise experience. And her budget was that of a small company. Her budget was 250 million. Mm-hmm. So we got this small company with this enterprise leader who gives us a lot of clarity, and we make far few mistakes than I did in my 5 other startups. Okay, so it's a story for another day, if you will.
Yeah. Yep, that does have a big impact though, Reggie. And that's good clarification. So you're an 8-year-old company, not a 3-year-old company, but your product line is 3 years old. And kind of your pivot is 3 years old, right?
Yes, correct.
Cool.
Correct.
Got a question from Faith. Faith, you want to jump in and ask your question, or do you want me to just kind of read it off from the chat here?
Well, either way, I guess I've been exploring a lot lately, ethics in technology and how it affects my work as a product manager. And I'm wondering if any of the panelists, would like to comment or, have, been starting to bring ethical concerns into that discussion, since we're talking about product vision. And I had kind of recently come across this tool. ThoughtWorks has actually surfaced this in their responsible tech playbook. And it kind of is a sort of a group, like serious fun kind of a game that, centers concerns that don't often get brought up in product discussions naturally. And I wondered if any of the panel have, been starting to introduce, that kind of perspective in their work at all, or if others on the call, kind of apropos of product vision, developing that sort of ethical or inclusive vision, or if you found that that's just not not a thing in your world yet. And if that takes us too far afield, then we can leave that for another day. I'm fine with that too.
I could jump in on that, if you will. Because obviously, because we're in the medical space, our whole platform is HIPAA compliant, but also our target market coming out are the underserved communities and rural communities. And the reason is because of their lack of access to digital health, but also transportation for the rural communities. And so our product is going to allow their physicians to get their blood pressure readings without having to go to the office. But also, research shows when you track and monitor your blood pressure, you can achieve controlled blood pressure. And right now, 45% of the country has high blood pressure. And so it's a major issue. And so we have to constantly think ethically because of who we're dealing with, and make sure we're on the right side of the line and not hedging into a space that we either put our data at risk, or we put ourselves at risk because of what we do. And so we're very ethically minded, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I actually love this question. I think there's not need, and I don't have any good answers for you because I actually am trying to figure this out too, but I think as technology kind of gets more and more into people's mainstream's lives, I think this becomes a question that's really important to ask, right? I mean, just take something like a Facebook where it's, okay, well, it adds a lot of value in people's lives, but it also can, there's arguments that it can be, divisive. I really wish this type of thinking would make its way into product work more than it does. And I actually, I'm going to go check out these tools. Because I really have wondered about this as well, on well, how do you bring ethical complaints in? And I've sort of, I guess I'll say, had them what I consider to be, people have been a little bit dismissive when I bring up complaints like this before, or just even, how do we think through this? So all that to say, I really love this discussion. I'd love if anybody else had ideas on this too, because it's something I've thought about, and I think 5 years from now it's going to be a much more talked about topic in this space here, right? So I'm very curious to see what other people, if anything, is, or even people even talking about this with their company. I think they should be.
Yeah, I think Robinhood brought it to the forefront for many of the product folks.
For sure.
I haven't tackled it either. We have a tendency to talk about it in AI and, making sure we don't have bias in our, AI and machine learning and all that. But it's so much broader than that. And I don't know how to bring it in either. I've listened to podcasts on it. The question is, when I'm building something, how could this be used negatively? And putting that thought process in your day-to-day, but I haven't extrapolated it with the team either. But looking at tools it's a great question.
Yeah, and it touches so many different areas as well, right? Is it human behavior? Where I actually see it, and I've actually poked at it a little bit too, is just sort of not so much on the consumer side, but just selling a product before it exists. And are you upfront with that or not? And open and honest with your customers? I actually think that's an ethical question. To a certain degree, and so anyway, just again, it spans a bunch of different industries, a bunch of different places, and I think people get themselves in real trouble with it. So I love the question.
Well, Matt, I'll give you a good example of a product I recently saw advertised, and it's a bionic eye, and it said it allowed the blind to see. My issue with the product was that the eye was blue, and as an African American man, that turned me off, because when you build a product, you have to be sensitive to everyone. And right now that's not happening. And I agree. I think in the future it's going to be much more pervasive. But right now, I think people build to who they are around. They build to their surroundings. And if your surrounding isn't multicultural, your vision won't be multicultural.
Well, that gets back to data, right? I mean, you have to know who your customer is, and you have to build to your customer. And I think money has a lot to do with people's desire or ambition to treat ethics in a certain way. The stage you are in development, that sort of thing.
I thought it was interesting the direction Matt took that question on the ethics and the readiness. How far ahead are you selling your product? I went in a completely different direction. 3 years ago, I think it was, I went to a conference, and for those of you who don't know, conferences are these big gatherings of people that get together and talk about usually professional topics in person. It's really awesome. We used to do that back before the dark times. But I went to this Mind the Product conference out in San Francisco, and I saw a speaker named Mariah Hay, and she talked about ethics in product management. I'll actually put a link in. There's actually a recording here. I'll drop in here.
I just shared, Jason. I just shared in the chat and put on the research list. The first do no harm. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
It's
first
awesome.
do no harm. Yeah. It's a great talk. And one of her first principles of ethical product management, one of her first ethical product management principles was don't weaponize your product. I had a really cool conversation with her at the time, because at the time I was working in marketing technology. And by definition, marketing technology is a weaponized product because your whole goal is to gather data and use it at scale. Now, you can talk about even ethical weaponization, and because our whole operating principle in Silver Pop of the day was we are all about permission marketing, and we want to have as much information about you as we can possibly have with your permission so that we can communicate with you in a highly relevant and impactful and engaging way. So that technology can absolutely be used for good or it can be used for evil. And we see a lot of things going on in the legislative world today to handle those who are using it inappropriately, and using behavioral data and personal data in either using it unethically or at the minimum just not treating the data with care and protecting it at a level. And that's another part of the ethics for us that we talked about to a great deal, is how do we protect the data that we have and ensure that it's not abused not only by us but by someone else. And that becomes a really big component of the ethical conversation in product management. We have, we were talking earlier in the call today, asking how much data, do you have enough data to make data-driven decisions? Well, when you have enough data to make data-driven decisions, you've got a ton of data that can be abused at the same time. So the management of that data becomes a huge ethical issue for product managers, I think, and there's an ethical requirement to treat it with care and security and so on. And I know, Kelly, the amount of consumer data that you have to deal with leads a constant requirement to be on top of the management of that data. What are some other ethical issues that come to the forefront? Data management certainly one of them. Selling ahead or selling to the market. What are some of the other ethical issues that we need to be talking about?
I'll jump in real quick. I'm fired up on this topic now. You hit the data one, and one of the things I've seen consistently throughout my career is, and it's always made me feel kind of icky, just to be perfectly honest, to be involved with it, is this concept of companies sort of advertising, hey, we're very privacy forward, we're very, we protect your data, and you get that, and it's essentially a marketing pitch, and then you get behind the scenes and you're like, all of this customer data is just sitting unencrypted, and widely available to people. I've often found a discrepancy between what companies and people essentially say and then what you actually see behind the scenes as well. I've always tried to put that concept into practice more. And it's interesting the pushback you sometimes get between, okay, well, we need to go really lock this data down. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. Yeah. It's roadmap functionality. So I don't know. Again, I don't have an answer, but I think as an industry, and I think we all have a responsibility to help with that, and at least be an advocate for it, for being consistent between sort of the marketing piece and then what we do behind the scenes in terms of privacy and data and security, things like that.
Well, I think these companies should get ready for really securing their data, because this younger generation, not only do they want you to have a social conscience, but they also want to know what you're doing with their data. And so what we've decided to do is we're going to target our market with a real rewards program. And we're going to reward them for the amount of readings that they do put in. And we're going to reward them with things they can use, like grocery cards and things like that. Not some stupid points that it takes a year to make $1. It's really got to be real, because pretty soon people are not going to join your platform unless you could guarantee them that they're going to receive something, one, but number two, that you're going to respect their data and not sell it all over the planet.
Tiago, you got your hand up.
All right. Now, just to expand a little bit more on the ethics topic, it's not only about the data and how we protect the data, but also what kind of data we get. And going to Reggie's example of the bionic eye, there's a lot of context behind it. So if you interview people who are blind, you might be surprised that some people say, I don't want to leave my cane because this is my identity. This is what makes me who I am. So there is also this diversity component added to ethics. How do you build products that are not weaponized and they are as inclusive as possible? So you not only collect data, but you collect data from all the angles, as many angles as you can around the same problem, around the same objective, to build something that is broad enough to serve as many people as possible. And like product ethics and disability inclusion, diversity, they go hand to hand in developing products. In my former gig, which Kelly knows a lot about, there was like this ongoing concern about how to make sure that everybody's heard. And I think this is something that the cards that Faith shared, they really speak to it. How do we make sure we build products that are weaponized, and also how do we build something for everyone?
Good point. Leslie.
This has been a really interesting discussion, hearing what you all have to say and perspectives, and it made me think about the company I was just at for 5 years. Company's been for sale for the 5 years that I've been there, and they brought in a restructuring company to restructure us yet again, and their mission is to get us sold. So the new head of product was interested in lots of shiny new products. Oh boy, big push for that, all kinds of new stuff. So I was chatting with a partner yesterday that's involved with one of the products, and the company hasn't onboarded yet one customer, and it went live in February. And another product, I was like the subject matter expert because my background is accounting and finance. And so they came to me for like user experience, and I didn't understand the product because every other accounting system offers it within their platform. So why would anybody need to buy it from us? But they went ahead with it. And meanwhile, I'm here in compliance. And so I was in the credit card industry, fintech, and we have millions of dollars of data integrity fines from the card associations, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, that I'd been forecasting for years, and they grow over time. And I was presenting them every quarter to the executive group, the forecast. Well, they got up to $5.5 million a year. Well, can you do better than that in sales? Didn't seem like it with all these shiny new products. And then all of a sudden somebody said, oh, we need to take care of these. But for years, they hadn't been allocating resources. One of the biggest was a data error where there was, in the code, there was one character error, and it took them an entire year to allocate engineering resources to it. I just don't get it. Cost and benefit, revenue versus expenses. It just, it was the head of product's decision how to use our engineering resources. I just didn't get it. And after this discussion, I'm still not getting it. I don't think that was ethically right for the company, for the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that gets, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was gonna say that could be one of those cases where it was difficult for them to make that decision, but they may have been in alignment with corporate and product strategy, right? Like, so that could have been the place where it went wrong. Is the strategy was we have to sell, we have to make ourselves look good to sell, versus we're actually trying to go do something. Because I think you're right. Otherwise, it's really hard to say we're trying to build a good product and then have something like that could be negatively affecting both your customers, your end customers, and the company itself, unless you're just tunnel focused on, we got to sell, we got to do something else. And then, the decisions associated with that are sort of tortured, I think, as a result.
Yeah, I'm sure there was no market research. I'm positive about that.
And that comes back around to the Faith's original question was really how do you apply, and correct me if I kind of misstate the essence of this, Faith, because I'm going from memory here, but it was really around how do ethical considerations come into play when establishing or when managing to your product vision. And I think a lot of what you're kind of reflecting there, Leslie, and there was another question in the chat about Google's historic statement in their code of conduct about don't be evil, and that seems to have kind of gone away. And there's a little bit of a conversation. There was a little bit of conversation about that back in 2018. I did a quick look up as well. It's how do you instill ethics into your vision or into your practice in a way that does survive and that an individual contributor can use as a lever to call attention back to our values and the way we want to offer. How can we use that to manage? Jeff, you talked earlier in the call today about profit from the core and using that value of getting back to our core and using that as a big sign to hold up and say, hey, we're straying from what we've agreed is important here. And establishing those ethical considerations as part of your company culture, as part of your vision, whether it be as part of the vision itself in explicit terms or as part of your company culture, is something that individual contributors can hold everyone to. Say, hey, if our company culture and our core values and our statement of values says this is the way we behave, and I see something that is opposed to that, then by simply publishing those values, my company's given me permission to call attention to it. And if the company's not living to that, to your point, maybe it's time to move on, and that can help. That can help to guide that more ethical behavior as well. One of the things that I sometimes like to bring back, and I'm not going to get on a biblical soapbox here at all, but there is a biblical premise that was introduced in the New Testament about that the Catholic Church has evolved into the practice of what's called excommunication. And the hope of that notion is that when people stray from the teachings of the church, when they're living outside of what the church believes is right, and they won't come back into it, you set them out of the church in hopes that the loss of that community will shock them into returning to moral behavior, into appropriate behavior. And that notion can also apply to the point that you're making, Leslie, about ethical behavior within the company. If we're not operating in accordance with our values and people start to leave over that can be the shock to the system that guides the company back to ethical behavior as well.
The only issue with that is money. When the company is making money or needs to make money, it seems like ethics goes out the window. Or if they're making money and it seems like the boat is on smooth water, why rock the boat, right? And that is why we are having this discussion. It's because revenue trumps everything in most businesses, in majority.
Yeah, I think it even. Sorry.
Go ahead, Mark. You land the plane for us.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it goes deeper than that. But what I've seen people do in the past, which is kind of interesting, is they created like a mission statement for their product. So let me give you an example, which I have come across recently and often, is sales wants to go and sell something to a customer. I'm on the discovery call with them and I say, this is not a good customer for us. They're not going to use the product. They're only going to use 10% of the functionality. They're not going to get the value. And it's just not what they're looking for. And sales doesn't care. They want to make the sale. And I look at it as, no, I want good customers. And this is not a good customer. And I mean, it's a much lesser extent than what Leslie was talking about, but I think you have to kind of make those decisions early on. But it is a tightrope, because I'm not sure who was saying it, but when, depending on what the company goals are, if the company goals are to sell the company in a year, then all they're going to care about is getting customers in the door and revenue, and they don't really care how good the customer is. Me as the product person, I have to say, no, that's not the type of customer we're looking for. I want people who are going to love my product as much as I do. So it's definitely a tightrope, but I think if you kind of have that, even if it's more theoretical, what is the vision of your product? What is the mission of your product? And try to kind of constantly get back to that.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. So bringing that focus back to the notion of what is our mission, what is our vision, and shining a spotlight on that. And going back to Matt's statement earlier in the call, if you've got it written down, it gives you something to point to and hold people account to. And we are out of time today. That's it for Product Coffee today. But I tell you what, I think this was a great evolution of the conversation. I was really excited about the direction. I know we got a couple of hands up that we're not going to be able to get to, and I'm sorry. But I want to thank everybody for joining today, and I think we will definitely expect to have a follow-on conversation on this topic, and maybe bring in a couple of folks with some expertise in the space to help talk more about bringing ethical considerations into your product vision. So thanks everybody for joining today, and I hope you have a great week.